I love just grabbing a ruler and drawing some perspective lines. It makes me feel like I've really accomplished something, even though 99.9% of the drawing is still in front of me. Gentlemen, this has been a good day's work. I also like putting gas in my car and then declaring to my wife, well, that was a fun road trip. Want to go home? No. The act of getting the drawing to look good, once those lines are down, okay, yeah, that's the tricky part. Sometimes I'll start drawing and that drawing will extend off the page, or the car is too large in proportion to the building. It looks wonky. So I turn to the time-tested strategy of cheating, or at least coming up with a couple hacks here and there that streamline the process a little bit. Roll the tips! Tip number 1, just draw your grid once, people. Even though I like drawing the grid itself, at least the first time, I don't like drawing the grid and then screwing it up over and over and over and having to start from scratch with a new grid every single time. If I'm drawing digitally, a lot of programs have grids built in. That is a huge time saver, but for you folks learning to draw by hand, man, it does take forever. So here's what I do. Draw it once, then reuse it. I use tracing paper here. And I also have a thin Sharpie. Here I'm drawing my 1-point perspective grid. Then I tape it down, put my paper over it, and then I could mess up as many times as I want. I don't have to redraw the grid. The black Sharpie is pretty important because you want to get ink on your hands, so your friends ask you, what have you been doing? I drew this. Look at my art. I drew this. Hey, where'd they go? You also want to be able to see the lines through the paper when you lay it down on top of the grid. The black Sharpie helps with that too. I guess it doesn't have to be black, but the ink has to be dark enough that you can see it through your paper. Also, on the free resources page of my website, I have a place where you can download some perspective grids, so if you don't want to draw these over and over again, you can just use that resource instead. But why use tracing paper for your grid if you're gonna reuse it? Why not use some paper that's a little more, durable? This is where Big Brain Brad comes in, because if I need 2-point perspective, I have a second sheet of paper that also has a perspective point on it, and I could put that thing anywhere. If I want my vanishing points closer to each other, I just slide the page over. Further apart, I move them further apart. Plus, a lot of times your vanishing points aren't on the paper you're actually drawing on. They're off your canvas. This makes it so much easier to do that. The downside is if you're drawing on paper that's thicker, like Bristol board or watercolor paper, you're probably not going to be able to see your perspective grid underneath it. But that is where tip number 2 comes in. Tip number 2, block out your shapes first. Okay, I'm stuck. This isn't funny anymore. When I draw out all my perspective lines, I tend to treat my drawing as precious. I hate that. I'm not loose. I'm not trying new things. That's when it gets frustrating. If I draw a room, I may get a little too much ceiling. I may get a little too much floor. Or I want to shift things over. Or I might start drawing and next thing I know is half my couch is off my canvas. Here's an example of an abandoned sketch I did last year where I was drawing an abandoned alley. Yes, an abandoned sketch of an abandoned alley. It's funny. I get it. I'm looking down onto the street. How tall should each story of each building be? How wide should the landings be? What about the staircase? How should I draw the railing? I kept redrawing parts over and over again because I was focused too much on the details. What I should have done is just blocked out the big stuff and worried about the details later, like the spindly things on the balcony. The thing that my students struggle with the most when they're starting perspective lessons is getting the scale right when they're drawing things in this room. Because you draw the bed and add details, and the dresser and add details. No. Block it all out first. And a lot of times I'm not using a ruler, I'm just using my perspective grid. It's my basis to get a feel for it. And if it doesn't work, I just crumple it up and throw it away. Actually, don't crumple it up. You will need that as a reference for your next sketch. And this goes for digital drawing too. Just big boxes of where stuff is gonna be. Tip number 3, use Blender. Oh yeah, now we're cheating with fire. This is something I love to do. Blender is a free 3D rendering app, and making basic shapes and moving them around is fairly easy, even if you're just a beginner. I have a basics video right here on this channel for that. I don't get too complicated with things. I just get the basic shapes in there. Okay, maybe I do get complicated with it sometimes. It's just easier to block in a staircase than it is to figure out how it's supposed to look. But then I can export that image or even just get a screen grab of it, and that becomes the rough sketch layer of my illustrations. I usually take it into Procreate or Photoshop and draw out my art from there. I drew an entire 20-page comic book this way. The story itself takes place in only like 4 places, so I modeled each one of those places out, and then I just spun the camera around and grabbed different shots from different angles and inked over it. It took a good amount of time to come up with the models, but then it saved a ton of time when I had to like draw out all the panels. Tip number 4, draw over a photo. It's okay. No one's gonna get mad at you. Okay, don't draw over my photo. I already have a mustache. Stop it! If you have a photo of a room or a street or whatever to use as a reference, just put a piece of paper over it. If you're drawing digitally, reduce the opacity on a different layer, sketch over it. You may want to grab all of those elements and just use those as the base elements that you're going to stylize. Or you might just like the angle that it's at and you just want to figure out where the vanishing points are and use those. I've seen entire videos where artists go crazy using photos as a starting point and creating some really slick looking illustrations. I'll link this one down below in the description if you want to see more of their work. Tip number 5, go isometric. I love me some isometric art. Now, isometric grids are kind of like perspective grids. At first they look like perspective grids, but your lines don't go back to a vanishing point. So it kind of feels like fake perspective. But if you're brand new to perspective drawing and you find the vanishing points to be frustrating and kind of hard to deal with and you're just struggling, this isn't a bad place to start. It's a good way to learn perspective without having to go through the ordeal of all the perspective stuff. And then when you start to get the hang of how things look in 3D, then you can shift over to a more traditional 2-point or 3-point grid and start redrawing those things there to see how it works. Keep in mind, this sort of thing works better if your camera is further away from your subject than when you need to get up close and show detail. But there's an exception to every rule. There we go. Feels good to get these off my chest. If you want to see some other videos in this style, I'll link them right here. You can see them on the side of the screen. Look at that. As always, big ups to the channel members. Don't forget to check out the description to learn more about my Learn to Draw in 60 Days course. I've got a link and some discounts down below just for you guys. I think that's all I got for today. Peace out.